So, Duncan, it's the planning system. This is it. Everyone on the panel is going to worry, I'm sure.
Okay, so well, thank you very much for having me. It's good to say, so I'm from the campaign Priced Out. We campaign for affordable house prices and represent the vast number of people who are absolutely nowhere near able to own their own house in the UK. Particularly in the lovely city we're in at the moment, but sort of across the whole of the south of England, the east of England, and plenty of parts of the north of England too. The cost of housing is absolutely extortionate. And particularly for young people, I noticed Chris say that he thinks that the energy is the number one factor. I would say for young people, housing is the number one factor in the cost of living crisis. Anyone who's not got their own house is systematically, its house prices get further and further out of reach by the year. And so there are two reasons. I would say planning is quite a crucial one, and the analogy I like to use, in case you don't know about the planning system, the way it works at the moment is that every local planning authority has to come up with they do a strategic housing market assessment research on how many houses they should be building, and then they're meant to find the land to find those houses. So it's complete central planning. It is the government saying we need this many houses to be built, and then every single house that gets built then needs planning permission. Now imagine if we did this with something like cars. If the government said, right, we're going to do a strategic car market assessment, and we're going to think about how many cars we think the country needs. So they come up with a target, and then naturally they underbake the target because governments don't do very good at actually assessing the things, and then they never get this number of cars built anyway. So then the number of cars, you start to create car shortages. The existing cars then go up in price, and that means people then think they're going to get onto the car ladder because they're going to they'll be sure to see their car price rise, so people take out ever-increasing car loans to afford a car, but then you find that young people can't get onto the car ladder, so the government then comes up with a scheme called Help to Buy, where young people are then incentivised with even more debt to buy a car, but of course increasing the amount of debt people can have for an asset pushes its price even further. I do think we do have a problem with planning. There's all sorts of, we have green belts which are distorting where houses can be built massively. The best places to build houses are generally designated green belts at the moment. I don't think, sadly, there is much political opportunity to change much about the way the planning policy is currently conducted in the UK. Every single political party either wants to restrict planning even more or not talk about it. So I don't know what the political opportunities to do anything about this. The only other thing I was touching on is mortgages, which does have a huge impact on the cost of a house as well. And we do not need the government to be incentivising more debt to be poured into the housing market. That's just going to push up house prices even more. It's a complete disaster.
But it works so well in the United States. Don't you want to do the same thing we did?
Yeah, exactly. So banks basically set up to encourage more debt to be used to buy houses, and part of the whole reason that the whole global market will crash.
Nothing can be done about it in terms of the planning system, but Ed Miliband basically just wants to set the price of rental houses, right? Is that why he supported that price fixing rent?
Yeah, it's widely supported in the Labour Party.
Yeah.
I think mostly in the Labour Party they'd like to see something more radical. I mean, I actually think the mansion tax was also not particularly well received in the Labour Party, which really wanted something a bit more robust. I mean, the more sort of radical elements of the Labour Party would probably like to see them change some of the council tax bands. And really, if you're really into redistribution on the basis of housing, you probably would go down that road. But ultimately, it's quite well understood. You know, the problem is the lack of supply. And it's well understood across the political spectrum. The thing is that the Conservative Party is now based, there is no policy that the Conservative Party undertakes which is not tailored towards its election campaign. And that is partly what happens to you when you take a chancellor and you put him in charge of your election campaign. You find out that actually you're on election footing for 5 years. And as you said, the way that he's decided to fulfill that is to put our entire economy at risk so that people in the South East find it a little easier to buy houses. And that's quite well understood, even among Tory backbenchers, actually. That's not a very wise solution to follow. It's very well understood by Labour, but Labour, you know, again, I mean, to reiterate that criticism, there are no interesting ideas coming from the Labour Party right now. And insofar as they emerged at all, really during the 2-year policy review, they were stamped on very, very hard to make sure that nothing that could be weaponised against them came through. So really, it speaks probably more to our political culture and the intense caution that you get from trying to sort of insulate yourself against that, but it does about the actual personality of the Labour Party or even against it.
Thank you. Christian, we just heard that there's support for this across the political spectrum. Surely, if there's support for it across the political spectrum, then we should just do it. Who's going to complain? Who is complaining?
Well, the ones who do complain do nothing else 24 hours a day. It's a classic public choice problem. Everybody knows this in a very vague and abstract way, but the people who are opposed to housing development, I follow some of these groups on Twitter, and I see what they are up to. They do nothing else the whole day but egging each other on to sign petitions, to contact planning officials, to write articles somewhere. That is an industry. People can literally a full-time job to prevent house building.
A full-time job doing, it's to stop people doing this.
Yes.
Wow.
That's an industry.
I think, well, I get completely wound up by NIMBYs in exactly the same way. NIMBYs not in my backyard. It's completely rife in the UK, particularly out of London. It's got the worst NIMBYs, but there are hotspots. I was living in Oxfordshire for a while, and they're absolutely terrible. The CPRE are the sort of the godfathers of this movement, really. And
most expensive place to live in the UK, Oxford.
Compared to salaries, yeah. So the cost, well, Oxford certainly itself. Oxford wages are pretty much like the Midlands. Oxford house prices are pretty much like London. So if you're on a wage that's pretty ordinary in the UK and having to pay London rents and London house prices, you're going to find you don't have very much money left at the end of every month.
And I don't see the problem.
Well, so there's certainly people who are completely insulated. You know, they own their house outright, and for those people, you know, it isn't a concern to them. But the other thing that we have, though, is that, as I was saying, everybody puts so much of what they earn in their life into their house that if there was a threat to the house price, then you can kind of make a rational, from a personal perspective, you can make a rational argument that why you're going to fight against any move that's going to jeopardise your house price. In exactly the same way as if we limited car numbers, you'd be so keen to make sure your car didn't go down in value because you'd worked all your life to buy a car. So there is, in a way, a rationality to NIMBYism as well as just, you know, I like the view from my house, which you could also argue is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, there are no solutions to problems like this as long as we ignore the fundamental issue here, which is a disregard for the question of property rights. We basically have no property rights. You know, we're completely at the behest of the planning council or some other government entity, and once you give government control in whatever form over how we use our property, then yeah, all these special interests, all these pressure groups are going to come and they're going to capture that. The only solution here is to a property right regime, with the idea that you own a property, and you own property means you own it, which means you get to build what you want on it. It means you get to use and dispose it as you see fit. You know, as long as you're not
do something crazy. Yeah.
What about something crazy?
Like a really ugly house.
Yes, and it's interesting, you know, but the fact is that you don't have a right to a view. You don't have a right to have a pleasant house in front of you unless you bought that land as well. So, you know, people now expect that, yes, there's a green belt there, there should always be a green belt there because I want a green belt, but your wishes and wants are not the standard of rights, are not the standard of truth. And property rights is the only solution to this problem. And it's the only solution to most of the problems we're talking about.
Christian, what's it going?
Yeah, quick point. There are actually market solutions to this if you're afraid of somebody building a really ugly house. They existed before the Town and Country Planning Act. There were options to buy restrictive covenants, to buy development rights, which meant you didn't have to physically, to literally buy the plot of land itself. You just had to buy an exclusionary right, and that would then allow you to ban either all development or certain types of development. And in that way, let's say a group like CPRE in a system like that could still buy development rights. It's just that they would then have to put their money where their mouth is, rather than just signing petitions. They would actually have to collect money from their members. So you would have, NIMBYism would have a price. And if people have to pay for it, well, we know that demand curves slope downwards.
The market's incredibly innovative and find solutions for these things in fantastic ways when they're allowed to function. And all of these problems that we're experiencing are problems of not allowing markets to function properly.
Last word quickly to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely get what you're getting. I don't think we're going to see anarcho-capitalism sweep across the country tomorrow. So that isn't going, I'm not going to be doing a lot of this in priced out. I love that your movement is making the points you are, because it's very useful to add to the sort of...
To clarify, Darren is not an anarcho-capitalist.
Oh,
I am not an anarcho-capitalist.
Okay.
Yes, anarcho-capitalism, no.
Okay, great. I do think that, so we are kind of stuck with the planning system we have, but what we can do is within that, we can make sure that councils are being as ambitious as they can with their housing targets. At the moment, we keep seeing political parties, council groups on local councils trying to water down their housing targets as much as possible, because then they can say to their local electorate, look, we saved your village because there won't be as many newcomers coming in and adding to your community. So there's...
We used to like people.
So if you, next time you see a politician saying, save the Greenbelt, or let's avoid extra house building where we are, write a snotty letter. Please do it, because they do, especially local councils, they do read every letter, and a lot of them actually fret about every single letter that they receive. It does make a difference every time. Thank you very much.